Welcome to the Hockey Writers Union Junction, a weekly show from our Columbus Blue Jackets insider, Mark Scheig, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, he covers everything that happens with the Jackets. So get ready. It's time for another get-together at Union Junction.
Hello, hockey fans. We're back with Union Junction. It is the end of June already, really. June 30th, 2022. And the time you're watching this is exactly 1 week away from the Upper Deck NHL draft in Montreal. Things are going to get popping here. Nick is back with us. How you doing, Nick?
Living the dream, Mark. Every day we get to do this is a joy.
Every day we get to do, you know what else is a joy?
I have a feeling it has something to do with skating.
Now, why would you think that it has something to do with skating?
Because I've been on this show once or twice.
Just once or twice, and
Yeah.
you may have recalled it coming up at different points, right? Especially first thing in the morning, right?
Oh, that's right, in the morning.
Yeah, in the
because
morning.
Of the morning skate thing, right?
Yes. And we know.
Delightful.
And we know that you've already signed up for it.
Multiple times. I've unsigned up and re-signed up just so that I wasn't lying to the listener saying that I have recently signed up.
Oh, no, listen, I do 10 different emails, so there, you get 10 times.
Oh, even better.
That's the way to do it.
I'll make a new account.
Yeah, and I'll make sure you do it. Okay, good. Burner counts the way to go here. But honestly, with everything going on, you want to keep up with all the free agent action. You want to keep up with the trades. There are going to be lots of those. There's going to be a lot of off-season action. The morning skate is the place to go. Morningskate.io. News directly to your inbox without you having to lift a finger. How's that?
Wow, it sounds great.
Do it. Morningskate.io. So, Nick, I wrote a piece on Wednesday and basically telling the Blue Jackets what I thought the perfect 12-step plan would be for a perfect offseason. I figured this would be a great time to not only talk about the offseason, but I want to also kind of know what your perfect offseason looks like. So in the piece, I'll kind of start at the top here. Basically said, number one, investigate trading up at the draft. So let me just kind of throw a little bit of background here. So you all know who Bob McKenzie is. Now, recently retired. He's got the new margarita thing going. But he still periodically comes in and talks about the draft and actually does the scouting polls that come out right before the draft. Well, Yuri Sikorsky ended up being number one on that poll. And the significance of that is that poll is a pretty good indicator of how the top of the draft is going to go. It usually nails the number one pick. This year, it's certainly up in the air now, especially with Sikorsky being number one there. And he's not the only one that thinks that it could happen. But look at it from a Blue Jacket standpoint all of a sudden, Nick. So if Slavkovsky goes to Montreal and the Devils are at 2, and they're not necessarily, they have Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier, maybe they don't need a center or they don't have as much of a need for a center. And I said, look, the Blue Jackets with 6 and 12, they need to call New Jersey quickly and see if they can make something happen. Is there a realistic possibility, Nick, in your mind, of a trade-up scenario?
I would say I'm leaning more towards no in terms of realism. There is definitely an opportunity there, but generally when you're this high in the draft, at least in the last, 10 or 15 years, you don't really see much movement there because a lot of teams are really starting to value the draft and developing their own people as opposed to bringing in those other guys.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the last time that huge moves were made at the top of the draft when the Sedins were drafted and now they're going into the Hall of Fame. So that could be an indicator of just how far away we've moved from teams actually pulling the trigger on those high end deals. But like you do mention, there is opportunity there. And if the right deal does present itself, I mean, you're only trading from second or third or fourth down to 6, maybe potentially. Maybe a team does want to swing for the fences and pull the trigger on that one.
So here's what I think. I think both teams would have to look at it from a Blue Jacket standpoint. If you listen to this show, you know that we've talked ad nauseum about their need for a top center. They need to find that number one guy to be able to really build their core around. If both Shane Wright and Logan Cooley end up being available at number 2, assuming Slavkovsky goes first in Montreal, there's an opportunity there for the Blue Jackets, because 6 and 12, if you look at a draft value chart, at least most of the ones that I've seen, indicate that it's actually better to have 6 and 12 than it is to have number 2 straight up. And I actually made the argument the Blue Jackets could actually get even a little bit more in that kind of a deal. But where it gets interesting is the New Jersey side. Since they have the centers, they need wingers. They need scoring wingers, and they need to build up on defense. If you got 6 and 12, you can do that, right? So if you have 6, you could probably get one of the 2 top defensemen in Nemec or Jiricek. And then at 12, there's a bevy of forwards that are available that they could take. I think there's something to it. I don't know how New Jersey feels about actually giving up the second pick. And I don't know how Columbus feels about trading up, but boy, if there's an opportunity for Columbus to get a top center, they're going to look at it. And again, from a New Jersey standpoint, boy, I'll take it back to you. Would you rather have the second overall pick, or would you rather have 6 and 12? I think I'd rather
For
have
New
6
Jersey?
and 12.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because then you get 2 top 12 picks. Then you get to address 2 organizational needs and not just one. And you're talking about 2 of the top prospects. I mean, what's going to be more beneficial for the New Jersey Devils? Shane Wright by himself, Logan Cooley by himself, or some combination of Nemec, Jiricek, and another, like a scoring winger of some kind, like Kamel, Lakaramaki, or some other of the scoring wingers that are out there. I think it's the second one. And you're right, you normally don't advocate trading a top pick, but this is a weird situation. I think there's actually the elements for it.
Yeah, it's definitely unique because they have those other 2 franchise centerpieces in Hughes and Hischier.
Yep. I want to talk about
it's wild.
Lottery luck and the fact that it took the lottery for them to get up to that point. What's it going to mean? What can they make from it? That they're going to be a team to watch regardless, because they have cap space. They have a ton of needs, especially in goal, especially in scoring winger. They're going to be one of the more fun teams to watch, the New Jersey Devils. But will they give up number 2? At least they're listening. So if they're listening, you have to think Columbus is making that call. They have to.
Yeah.
They need to get that top center. If that opportunity is there, they got to go for it.
That's the thing. There's not very much top center material outside of those top 2 guys.
You can make the argument for Gauthier, but he's more of a winger, or at least that's how he came up. But that's the question that the Blue Jackets have to consider, is if they call New Jersey and they find out what the price is the gap from what they could get to Cooley, right? What do they feel like the gap is? And that will ultimately answer the question if they do it or not. Now, let's just say the Blue Jackets don't trade out. They keep 6 and 12. So step 2 says, I think they have to leave with a top center and a top defender. They still can do that if they elect to keep 6 and 12. Right. So Cutter Gauthier is somebody that I think they'd be very interested in. Big guy who can score. He says a lot of teams asked him about playing center at the next level. So that's very much a possibility. Again, they could have Nemec or Jiricek if one of them is available in the 6th pick. Then at 12, there's a whole bevy of options that are available for them. So they have to leave the draft with a top center and a top defender if they keep the 2 picks one way or another. What do you say about that?
I think that's fair. That does make sense, especially if you look at it really does depend on if they think that Johnson is a winger or a centerman. I think that's also really key and is going to factor in here.
Yep.
Because if they think that he is a center, then they've got their 2 guys in Sillinger and Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like we've mentioned, there's not a ton of top talent in that center position. There's a lot of parity once you get past 4 or 5.
Yep.
So you kind of would assume that Yarmo would take the best player available regardless.
Yep.
Someone I wanted to ask you about,
Yeah.
because, you know, if those two guys, those two defensemen are taken, Jiricek and Nemec,
Yep.
or sorry, Jiricek and Nemec.
Yep.
Anyways, I got their names wrong, but if they're gone, do you see a guy like another guy whose name I can't say, the Russian on Saginaw, Pavel, whatever.
Menchukov.
Yeah, do you see him as a target?
At 12, I do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've watched Menchukov live when he's been in Erie, and guy can skate, got a bit of an offensive side to him. Just got a few things to round out, but no, I very much think he would be one of the guys at 12 that would be very available. I know that he spoke to 28 teams at the Combine. I think a lot of teams would be interested in having somebody like him. I think he goes somewhere in kind of the 10, 15-ish range. So 12, if they grab a forward first and Menchukov's there and the two top ones are gone, and I'll throw out Kevin Korchinski's name because that's probably the third best defenseman in a lot of people's minds. Absolutely in play, to answer your question.
Cool.
Yeah. So let's go to number 3 here on the list and the last part of the draft, and then we'll move forward to the offseason here. And I make the point, we talk about 6 and 12. They're the 2 first-round picks, and that's obviously where you're going to get your top talent from. But remember Boone, I'm going to bring up Boone Jenner for a second, if you remember. He was drafted in his draft year in the 2nd round. Now he's the team captain, right? So there's a lot. So here's the thing. So there's a lot of talent in this draft that doesn't necessarily get the attention of the top players, but eventually they can come and make an impact. Jenner is one of them. Jonas Korpisalo is another. Mersley. I mean, we can go on and on about all the different examples. Mark Stone was drafted 175th in his draft year. Need I say more?
No, there's always a lot of depth.
There's a lot of depth, and I make the point you need to make the most of that 2nd round pick, because if you look back at recent past, the Blue Jackets have not had too very many 2nd round picks in the last couple of years. And they can not only get 2 good players with 6 and 12, they can get a third good player with this pick. And my point is you got options with it. Take your best available player that could end up being, in their mind, a 3rd first rounder, depending on how their list looks. Or there's teams that don't, like, I think it's Calgary that doesn't pick until like the 50s or something like that for their first pick. And the Blue Jackets did, if you remember do you remember the Texier draft, Nick?
Not really, not super well.
Okay. So real quick story. So this was the year that they went all in, and they didn't have a pick until much later in the draft. They ended up trading Keegan Colasar to Vegas.
That's right.
And then Vegas gave the Blue Jackets a 2nd round pick that became Texier. So that would be an example of a team that has no 1st round pick or wants to get in, make a trade to get. The Blue Jackets are in a position they could trade down. They could trade with a team that doesn't have a draft pick. They can maybe even get a 2023 2nd round pick. It's just, there are options, but I think I want fans to understand that that's an important pick. It's not 6 or 12, but it's still very important in the grand scheme of things for the Blue Jackets. When you have this kind of ammunition, you have to be able to maximize it the best you can. And the point is, they have to find the right use for it, whether it be trading down, whether it be picking the right player. It has its own level of importance, and there are game changers available. So hopefully they did their homework enough.
And all things considered, 44 is still pretty early in the 2nd round.
That's right.
So there are teams who are going to value that. They're going to see maybe 1 or 2 guys who slip from the 1st round, even that late, that they're like, oh man, we got to jump to get this guy. So maybe even if there isn't movement on that on day 1, maybe day 2 of the draft, teams will be calling and looking to trade out.
There will be a lot. I do expect there to be a lot of pick trades, especially with so much unknown, with so much wide range of opinions. You're probably going to get that maybe even in the 1st round too. I mean, if they can't even agree on one, what makes you think they're going to agree on anything else besides that? We don't know. Well, so fans, next week, before we move on here, we're going to be taping the night before the draft. So we'll have a lot more talk about this. We'll actually talk about what we're hearing and things like that on next week's show. So we'll revisit that at that point. Nick, let's move on here to number 4 on my list and pay Patrik Laine. Simple as that.
Yeah. Pretty easy.
Pretty easy. But the fact is we're still sitting here on June 30th and the deal is not done yet. So I know we talked last week, or we really weren't that concerned. I said that it would be a negative number. Has your stance changed yet or at all?
0%. Yeah, not at all.
Yep.
Again, once we hit, August, late July, maybe we think about being concerned.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's still pretty status quo on that front too, right?
It is. Everything, there's nothing out of the ordinary. You have negotiations, you have time. But Nick, the one thing that I will say, just as an aside, that again, this would be standard though. Teams are going to call the Blue Jackets. It's just it's due diligence. So you may hear teams calling about Patrik Laine, blah blah blah. Don't worry about that. The sides are talking. Standard fare for now, and perfectly 100% agree with you for once about. Wait till August. Let's see where we're at that point. And then from there, then you start to worry if you get closer to camp and they still don't have anything. But right now, go outside and play and enjoy your time, because that'll be better suited for you than trying to worry about it for now.
To use a 2015 meme, keep calm and Laine on.
There you go.
That was pretty bad. I'm sorry.
You should be. Are you?
YOLO. Yeah. I'm not upset.
There you go. All right. So number 5 on the list here is secure Adam Boqvist. So we talk about Laine, right? That's the big topic around the Columbus Blue Jackets. But I haven't really heard a lot of talk about Adam Boqvist. And as we sit here again on June 30th, when you're watching this, or maybe it's later, it's not signed yet. What's the level? I mean, again, he's an RFA. So again, I think it's still standard fare. But do you feel any differently about this one in terms of concern level or anything like that, that this one is not done yet, given that some other ones were able to get wrapped up?
Well, no, not really. We don't hear much about him or about this situation because there is the bigger fish, but he's an RFA, he's 21, he doesn't have arbitration rights.
Yep.
This is really something that's just going to get done. The question is the term and the number. But at this point, as long as they qualify him, which there's no reason to believe that they won't, I wouldn't be concerned.
Yep. Standard fare again, same thing. He certainly does have work to do. He needs to get stronger. He needs to get better defensively. But my goodness, the offense is just so tantalizing. He's only 21, like you said. Yeah, so but I will say that if he's able to develop, if he's able to get stronger, if he's able to show improvement defensively, that'll go a long way in helping expedite where the team goes. As you're talking about, he's a right-handed shot as well. If you can find that other guy that can slip in the top 4 and be a dependable two-way guy, that'll go a long way. Right now, he's got plenty of work to do to get to that point, but he could certainly help it.
For sure.
So speaking of defensemen, Nick, 6 and 7, I'm going to kind of package together because we know at the end of the season availability for the Blue Jackets, they made it a point to say, we're going to make it a goal to prevent goals against. The translation, they're going to do something on defense. And I know one of the fans had a question they brought on Twitter, and we're going to save that for the end, but it kind of ties into this conversation. So we think that they're going to do something, that they're going to add somebody, whether it be a free agent, whether it be made in a trade. In your mind, Nick, where do you think they go? Do you feel like that it's better to, is there a free agent out there that they should target? Is there maybe a trade target that they should go after for a legitimate top 4? Where do they go with this? How do they improve their defense, knowing that the goaltending is pretty much set at the NHL level?
Yeah, they have definitely shown their hand, and that's probably where the move is going to be.
Mhm.
Honestly, no real names come to my mind. Like I mean, there's Josh Manson in free agency, like you mentioned in your piece.
Yep.
Does Ben Sherratt make it to free agency? Is he a UFA this
Florida,
year?
Florida, I think, or the Duclair situation opens a little bit of cap space. You know,
Hmm.
I think Sherratt wants to stay, and I think the Panthers would like him. It's just, can they find a deal that works? But so if he gets the market, I'm sure the Blue Jackets will at least look at that option.
Well, that's like the type of defenseman that you're looking for, especially.
Yeah.
I would say that's as close as you can get. It would be Sherratt or Manson because they've got some playoff experience. They're
Mhm.
veterans.
Yeah.
They're heavy. They're big. That's what you're looking for is some veteran experience on a very young defense. So I don't think they go after someone who's under 25 to try and fill this slot. And I don't know if there's any
Yeah.
candidates that would really fit that who would even be available right now.
Mhm. Yeah, I know that they don't really depend a lot on free agency. I know Gus Nyquist aside, that was the one big one that they've recently done that's worked out. But they certainly do pick and choose their spots. But man, it certainly feels like that free agency is kind of the way to go. And they need to do something. And Manson's a righty, and that's another thing too. I think they'd want to target a righty to maybe play with Gavrikov or whatever the case. Just we know that something's going to happen there. It has to. They can't run it back the same way when they don't have the lack of size. But the question
Well,
though is
let's not
also,
let you off the hook. Who's a big target for you that you see?
I said in the piece, I think it's Manson. I think they need to look at
Yeah,
that.
Manson. That's the number one guy.
For me, it is.
Okay.
Now I know there's
Yeah.
probably I could probably look and find who all was a free agent at this point or who might be available, but yeah, because the
At
only
this point, defensemen like that are becoming so much more rare that
yeah,
teams aren't really letting them go via trade,
that's true.
unless it's for like a king's ransom, right? So,
Mhm. There's a premium to it. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So now have to see what the market sets. And so here's the other thing too, though, like thinking about the defenseman. And actually, I talk about this later in the depth, but Gabriel Carlsson, when is it? We're going to unleash him at some point, or are the Blue Jackets going to give him his chance? Because you look at some of the underlying numbers, I know it's kind of in a sheltered role, but I think he's fared okay. I mean, hasn't been able to stick in the lineup, but he's a big enough guy, or he's one of their bigger guys. I mean, I know they have to get him signed to a contract too. I mean, is he ready for a bigger role, in your opinion?
Yeah. I I'm off the Carlson train. I think that he could use a change of scenery if he's going to really blow up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a former first round pick, he's 25 now,
Yeah.
hasn't been able to stick in the lineup. Maybe he's someone that you package to get, a bigger fish,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that the coaching staff has already made up their mind on him,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion. So I think it would be tough for him to kind of take on a top four role like that.
I think that I agree with you on that. Yeah. Real quick,
Plus, he's a big guy. He's 6'5", but he's only 190 pounds, right? So he's another guy that needs to get bigger too, right?
Oh yeah, that applies to everybody. Quite honestly,
Yeah.
on the Blue Jackets defense. Real quick, I'm just pulling up Cap Friendly,
Of course.
and I'm going to pull up the defenseman free agents. It's going to read some of these off to you. I'm going to see if any of these stick out to you. I'm just
All right.
reading off the list here. PK Subban,
No.
Chris Letang,
Well, Letang would be great in any lineup.
but I think he ends up back in Pittsburgh. I think they got to prioritize that.
Yeah.
Anton Strawman in Arizona, 35.
No, I think he's a little past what the Blue Jackets would look for him for.
Okay, Nick Leddy.
Letty would be fun, but he's more of an offensive guy.
I'll klquickly read over some of these other ones here. Danny DeKaiser, Calvin DeHaan. Here's an interesting one just because of the situation. John Klingberg in Dallas. That would take a huge contract to get him, though.
Yeah. That's a big fish.
That's a huge fish.
For a guy who a lot of people think Adam Boqvist is going to turn into. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of comparables there.
Exactly.
That'd be fun, though.
It would be. Josh Manson, I mentioned. Oli Mata. Justin Schultz, 31, right-handed D, the Capitals. Colin Miller, Buffalo. Nikita Zadorov, Calgary. Will Butcher, Ben Sherratt, Alex Edler, Ian Cole, old friend Marcus Nudavera. That's your top 17 right there.
To me, the only name that really stood out there was Zadorov. He brings everything that you're looking for, except he's a lefty. But I mean, slide him in on the left side beside Boqvist. Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be interesting.
That would be some real balance.
Oh gosh.
And he wouldn't cost a super big amount, I don't think.
Definitely. So now that I'm looking at this list, number 22 is some guy you may have heard of, Ryan Murray. You bring Ryan Murray back to Columbus? I'm probably not, but just won a cup.
He did do a lot better in his last little stint. Like, he really stepped it up before he got shipped out.
Exactly.
Good Branson. What do you think of good Branson? He's down there too.
He is. So there's some options there. Like, it really just depends on what you can secure them for. If you can get them on a low risk contract to help out, then why not? The lower risk, the better. So whatever you can sign up for, that's where it'll be judged.
Yeah, for sure.
So number 8 on this list here, Nick, is hit the gym, boys. We kind of talked about that already with the defense, but they really were pushed around. I mean, and I had someone ask, we focus on the defense, but do they need to bring in a power forward? Like, I've seen people say, do we need to bring Josh Anderson back?
Well, yeah. When you think about it, I mean, who do they have who's really pushing things around up front either? Nothing. I got nothing. Nobody's coming to my head.
Boone Jenner. I mean, I suppose.
Jenner, yeah.
I know Voracek and Laine are bigger guys, but you really don't sit there and call them the most physical either. Nyquist isn't a big guy, but it's not averse to trying to play that way a little bit. But yeah, your point's taken. Remember the days when this was never a problem? You had the likes of Foligno and Dubinsky and Anderson and Dubois. These were just big guys, and they had no issue playing that way. It's a completely different team now. Skill, young skill, but now there's not enough balance. And it makes you wonder if they try to address a power forward somehow. Not sure that it would be Anderson, but it does make you wonder a little bit. At least it makes me wonder.
Yeah, that would add a different element to their forward car. I didn't even think about that.
And that's it, right? So one way that they could address it would be a trade or free agency. The other way would be the guys in the room hitting the gym hard. And I said it would be interesting to see who takes this to heart, this being the gym. Like, who comes in 10 pounds of muscle stronger and so on and so forth. Like, you can tell who put the work in during the summer to really, reach that next level. They have to get stronger. That's got to be one of their top priorities this summer as a team overall. Do you agree?
Are we going to take bets on it in shenanigans to see who the top is?
We can. How about we do it right now? Let's have a little shenanigans preview.
I'd lean towards like Kent Johnson, because everything we've seen about him is that he is a workhorse.
Yep.
So I would say that's my number one guy that I'd look at as someone who has just taken massive strides in the offseason. Because let's face it, his first little stint wasn't, I don't think, what he was expecting, and it wasn't what the team was expecting in terms of overall production. So that's a guy who is going to be fired up and wanting to prove everything this year.
That's a really, really good call. And so because you took that answer, I'll try and go in a different direction. And I'll say a guy like Cole Sillinger, because I think he's got the same kind of drive. Now, he certainly was able to get through most of the season. There were certainly some bumps in the road, but you want to talk to me about someone who's going to put in the work, who's going to be motivated to be even better, especially in possibly a top center role. Give me Cole Sillinger all day.
And hopefully we're both right, because that would be just fantastic for the Blue Jackets to have, those two guys as the future of their team, being leaders off the ice and growing themselves like that.
Right. So got a couple more here on the article, and then we'll get into some of the fan questions. So number 9, I put goalie depth. Now, you wouldn't necessarily think of goalie depth on the surface, because you've got Merzlikins locked in, Korpisalo's back for a year, Daniil Tarasov is now signed, Jet Greaves is in the organization and signed, but that's 4. And I know we're sadly, coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the unfortunate situation with Matiss Kivlenieks. And that is something that, that's a hole. And I make 2 points. One, you would expect the Blue Jackets to draft a goalie later to be able to keep the pipeline going. But I also expect possibly a depth signing to be kind of a number 5. Like they're 1 injury away from having their perfect plan in shambles. So it's just kind of one of those, I wouldn't call it lesser storyline, but just something to keep your eye on. Like if you see that they're signing a goalie, that's why, because there's depth that needs to be filled. And then when you get to the draft, you can almost count on them drafting at least 1 goalie. And they actually have a 3rd and 2 fourths, because the Foligno deal included a 4th this year. So they have 2 4th rounders. That's where I kind of wonder if they'll look at one of the goalies kind of in that 4th round range in the draft.
Yeah, and all 3 of those top dogs have shown that they can get hurt from time to time. All 3 of them missed time this year. So if 2 or 3 of them drop at any time, then you need a guy like JF to step up and be able to fill out that roster spot.
Yep. So if you see goalie news, fans, that is why. And then speaking of, we talked about some of the Monsters goalies. How about the Monsters overall? Just a general question for you. How important is a stable AHL franchise that is winning?
When I think about this, I think if you look at the Chicago Blackhawks, the Rockford Ice Hogs have been trash for so long. And they've kind of gone downhill. Like the Blackhawks, obviously, and they've dropped off the face of the planet in terms of success and whatnot. I know we're not talking about the Blue Jackets, but like that's something that I look at is, if you have a farm system that is flourishing, you'll also have an NHL system that is flourishing. Like look at the Marlies. They got really good before they won before the Maple Leafs got really good. The Lightning, their farm system won a Calder Cup. The other thing is, like, look at the Monsters. They were when they won their cup, then a lot of those guys came up to the NHL and they became, the best Blue Jackets team that we've ever seen.
That's right. Yeah, I'm with you. It's important to have. And last year for the Monsters, if you were watching it, they had the pandemic, so they had a lot of COVID situations come up. They also had a lot of injury situations, like Liam Foudy, shoulder injury. Josh Dunn had a lower body injury, missed most of the end of the season. So they had to really do a lot of things just to keep a roster going. And it was tough on everybody there. And now they have a new coach in Trent Vogelhuber, and I expect certainly improvement there. That's such an important, underrated aspect of an organization, to have a stable AHL franchise that's clicking so that everybody's developing at the pace that they need to be. Like you mentioned the Rockford example. Like if a team is not doing well there, the NHL team's going to feel it, because they're going to be calling some guys from there, and they need to be ready to seamlessly step in. So I just say improve the monsters. They really need to make sure that the right, a nice mix. You want some young guys, you want them to develop, but then they need to be surrounded by some good veteran players and a good coaching staff, so that they're just taking advantage of the playing time that they're getting. Huge.
And it's going to be big to see how their new head coach handles everything.
Absolutely. And I think he's a great, he was tutored well. Mike Eves was the coach and Vogelhuber was under him, just basically being groomed for the job. Being a former Monsters player, he knows what it's like to be in Cleveland. He knows what is expected. So from that aspect, it's a perfect fit. It's just now him being in this position now, how quickly can he acclimate himself and get the team in the direction that it needs to go. So Nick, signing the depth is number 11 out of the 12-step plan. So we talked about like Carlsson earlier. So Nick Blankenberg is still not signed. Emil Bemstrom is still not signed. Name we haven't heard in a while, Kevin Stenlund, is still not signed. Does everybody get a these are RFAs I've mentioned. Do they all get a contract? Do you see the team maybe cutting loose on one or two of these players at all?
It's definitely a loaded list. I did a piece earlier about the RFA situation this summer.
Yep.
Some of those names have come off the board, but even like Carson Meyer, who stepped in and was a pretty decent depth piece. That's one of the few guys that was actually throwing things around on the Blue Jackets front end. That's a good name to mention.
Yep.
He brings a different piece to that forward core. Does he stick around? I don't know. I would say most of them probably do get, 1 or 2 year, 2-way deal. But for me, the big name is Blankenberg. His next contract is going to really see, do they try and lock him up real long term? While they can get him at a cheaper price for maybe 4 years. That would be bonkers considering the sample size. But if they really believe in a guy like this, is it out of the question?
It's not out of the question. Actually, what did I see? I think, he's actually going to be at the draft party.
Yeah, that's right.
Signing autographs, him, Sean Corrali, and there's one other that's name is escaping me, but there are going to be 3 Blue Jackets, including Blankenberg there. So that's encouraging to see that he's already acclimating himself to the Columbus community. It's just now a matter of getting the contract done. And the way that Tarasov's contract got done, that was a 3-year piece where the end of that could look really good. Yeah, it's a good point by you. We wonder if they can get Blankenberg signed to something decent to, try to make it a bargain at the end.
Well, the other thing is he's a rookie, but he's 24.
Yep.
So we're already getting close to UFA status for a guy like that. So if you do want to keep him long term, maybe you got to just swing for the fences now.
That's it. Good point. So the last one on the list here, I say, is stay the course. And the question I've got for you is, we've gone through this whole thing now. Do they have to make a big deal? Like you're watching this, the Kevin Fiala deal happened on Wednesday, where he got traded to the Los Angeles Kings, and the Wild got a 1st-round pick, and they also got a good defensive prospect in Brock Faber. So seeing that kind of as a general guide, I feel like they just need to stay the course, because they're still in the midst of building their foundation. But could you see a bigger trade or something else happen that we're not accounting for?
The only one that really stands out is, we mentioned it on last week's show, maybe a guy like Bjorkstrand. It's kind of out there because he's got 4 years left at a really decent cap hit.
Yep.
But when you look at what he brings to the forward core and what all the other wingers are bringing to the forward core, that's a guy who, he's in his prime now. He's 27. So he's kind of nearing the tail end of when he'll be really, really valuable to another team as a trade piece. Over a guy like Nyquist, who's on the last year of his deal. So if they're going to really swing for the fences, that could be a piece that moves. I mean, we weren't expecting Atkinson to move last year, but those big pieces can move sometimes. Other than that, yeah, I don't know. You go ahead.
No, I agree with you. We didn't think that, that, like you said, we didn't think that Atkinson thing would happen, but they saw an opportunity to get a different kind of player and a bigger player. And that's something that they were missing. So it's like, okay, who are they missing? Power forward. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Kind of a shutdown D that's got some muscle. Well, they have ways to be able to address that. So yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up, that we know that the defense is going to be handled a little bit. It really comes down to, they're always looking to improve. So there's always room for that possibility. Is there a team out there that can't afford to keep a really good player because of the cap, and then the Blue Jackets can swoop in and, get them for a big time discount? Like I'm looking at the Vegas Golden Knights, for instance, right at the cap. They're going to be using they just acquired a huge contract, and it's going to go into long-term injured reserve. So can they find an opportunity there? It's like, there's always room for it. We can't rule it out. It's just in terms of, you don't want to trade away pieces that are part of the foundation. Like the 6th and the 12th pick, you're probably going to keep it unless you're trading up to get number 2 or something like that. You're not trying to grab a 28-year-old guy looking for a 7-year contract. I don't think they're at that point yet. So that's why I say stay the course. Like last year was really good. Ace the draft. Their foundation is being built. They could really solidify that foundation starting at the draft and making a couple of key decisions here or there. And then they just need to stay the course.
Yeah, I don't see them making a big swing like that until after they make it into the playoffs.
There you go. And I still think that's about 2 to 3 years away, in my honest opinion.
Yeah.
Let's get to some fan questions. So
Please.
Mick Walker. So I said Nick and I will answer this question on the show. I liked it. So he says that Jiricek and Nemec are gone. So he's going to assume that they're gone in this question. As of today, who are you, capital Y, capital O, capital U, taking at 6 and 12? And who did the Blue Jackets take? In that situation, I take Cutter Gauthier at 6. And at 12, I recently wrote in my 12 options for 12, Brad Lambert or Marchenko from Russia. Because those are the guys I think have the highest upside. You take the best player available in your opinion. I think that that's the range where you consider the guys like that. Although I could see them taking Korchinski or Minchukov as well if they go defenseman. But Gauthier, and then I'll say Brad Lambert. What about you? Who would you take 6 and 12, assuming the 2 top defensemen are gone? Is there anybody that you like?
Yeah, you can't go wrong. I don't think you could go wrong with Gauthier. He's a bigger guy, right?
He's a big dude. He's a big dude.
Yeah. So I don't think you can go wrong there. Also, Geeky's a big guy too. You mentioned him earlier as someone maybe Geeky and Savoy. So there's 3 really good center prospects that you could take at 6 there, I think. But also you mentioned Brad Lambert. That's a name that keeps coming to me, like as somebody who I could see Jarmo being interested in, not just because he's Finnish or plays in the Finnish league, but he's somebody that a lot of teams have gotten off of, which I could have seen him taking Atu Ratti last year too.
Yeah.
That would have been a stealth pick if they had a 2nd round pick, but he's just that kind of guy that I think Jarmo wouldn't hop off of his train. But also I did, like I mentioned, the guy in Saginaw, you can say his last name.
Yeah. Pavel Minchukov.
That's a guy who really jumps off the page for me because he is a bigger guy and has brought a lot of offense in the O.
And I'll give you one more because it was my steal of the draft. You'll see that on the hockeywriters.com. Meet the steal of the 2022 NHL draft. Frank Nazar, I think, is one of the most underrated prospects in this draft that could easily be one of the 10 best. The only reason he's down, I think, is because of his size. He's in the 5'10" range, but he is electric, and he's a center. And if the Blue Jackets are sitting there at 12 and they see his upside, great skater too, that's your guy. I think Frank Nazar is going to be the steal of this draft. I don't even think it's that close. So good question, Mick. Let's jump to a couple more here. Duncan McLeod, thank you for this question. This is a great question. If there was only room for one, Nick, so space for one, out of Kent Johnson, Kirill Marchenko, and Igor Chinakhov, which one starts with the Blue Jackets and which two start with the Monsters?
Oh, I think you have to start Marchenko with the Blue Jackets.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know. I'm just, well, actually, with the way things are in Russia right now, I don't know if he would be as much of a flight risk. But like, you look at a lot of the Russian prospects who have been alienated from franchises, like Nichushkin with Dallas. You look at he came over Shapachev with Vegas.
Yes.
Man, that was a massive mishandle there for a guy who could have been a huge part of their team. I would be extra cautious with those guys who are comfortable going back to the KHL. I know it's been a big deal getting Marchenko over here for years, but I think that should earn him a spot. And I think Kent Johnson and Igor, Igor spent some time in Cleveland this year. So he seems a little comfortable there, and Kent, he seems like a guy who would be able to handle that.
That's a tough question though, Duncan. I do think that the training camp and the preseason would certainly, that's the easy answer here, but like which one would end up on the Blue Jackets? I mean, if you're holding a gun to my head right now and you're making me answer this, I'd say Kent Johnson. Still the best. He's the top prospect of the three, in my opinion. I think he's the one that would step up and prove that he belongs, because he just got a skill set. Don't get me wrong; those other two have their skill set, but Johnson just has that extra thing that the other two just don't quite have. That elite. There's a reason he went 5th overall, kind of thing. So if I had a gun to my head and I had to go one guy of the Blue Jackets, I'd say Kent Johnson still.
Yeah, if you take Russia out of the equation, I go with Kent Johnson as well.
Yeah, still really, really good question on that one. All right, so we'll race through. We'll rapid fire a couple of these last questions. So let me take a look at this. So I thought this was, so our Hockey Writers colleague Mike Fink covers the Islanders, does a great job for them at Finks_thoughts. Says the Blue Jackets have the 12th pick, which is right ahead of the Islanders. Do you see a prospect that both players are targeting? Also, could the Blue Jackets trade the pick to a team looking to leapfrog them? So this is the classic leapfrog question. Could you see a situation where the Blue Jackets, could they trade out of 12, maybe down a couple of spots? I say that's very possible, Mike. If they're confident that their guy is still there and it's only a couple spots later and they get extra stuff out of it, I could totally see a team like Vancouver calling the Blue Jackets and jumping up a few spots, assuming they get something good back as part of the deal. See the same thing, Nick?
Agreed. 100%.
100%. Cool. All right. So let's see. We'll do one more because we're on a time crunch here. So Jonathan at CBJ Cannon Crew. That's cool. Hey, Jonathan. Assuming the Blue Jackets sign Laine, what number makes you feel really good? So that we're talking contract now. What makes you feel great? What makes you feel decent? And what number scares you?
For me, perfect deal is the exact same contract that Zach Werenski got. So that kind of sets a ceiling as like, this is as high as you go contract wise, for future negotiations. Great is like 8.7. So good is 9.5. That's where Werenski's at ish. And kind of making me scratch my head would be anything over 11.
Okay. For me, Jonathan, I would say what would make me feel great would be max term, 8 years at like kind of, you mentioned the Werenski number, 9.5 ish is you're staying under 10 and you're getting the full max term. What would make me feel decent would be sort of like a 4-year deal, because you are buying a couple of UFA years that way if they don't go the full 8. And what would scare me would be something short term, like he's not ready to go like all the way yet. So if that makes sense. So the longer the term, the better, the greater I feel. So 8 years, I'm feeling good as long as the number comes in around 9.5 ish. Decent 4 years, and it wouldn't surprise me if that's one of the things that they're talking. One of the options they're talking about. But then if they can't get to that and they do something short term, then oh boy, that
Is there any cap hit that would concern you?
Yeah, I think if you go over 10 right now, you're probably starting to get into my concern range. I feel good at 9.5. 10 would be about as high as I would go right now. But you start to go over that, like 11, I wouldn't feel good about that.
Mm-hmm. Sets a precedent, like in Toronto.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you see what Austin Matthews is a little over 11, right? And Tavares is 11.
Yeah, and Marner's over 10.
Mm-hmm. How's that working out for them?
I think it's working great. I love watching the circus every year.
Oh God. So my first shenanigans. All right, so I got one shenanigans question for you because we got to wrap it up.
Perfect.
It has to do with the Leafs. So
great.
We just talked about all those contracts, right? I actually wrote a piece the other day that they are legitimately, and I'm not even kidding, the favorite in the Eastern Conference to come out and be in the Stanley Cup final. We don't even know who their starting goalie is going to be. How and why?
Toronto media, anyone?
The sports books are the ones doing this. So we're talking DraftKings, we're talking BetMGM, we're talking PointsBet.
Probably they just see the award. They see Matthews got the Hart and the Ted Lindsay, and they're like, he's gonna do great things. I don't see it. They gotta really hunker down here.
They took Tampa to the limit, so they're probably seeing that they're real close, and they're closely watching what they do in goal and with some of their other moves as well. I think them getting Giordano and Liljegren back together, it's going to be the best defense they've had to start a season. So I think they're possibly looking at the upside, but until I know who's in goal, I think that's just silly to. So over Tampa Bay, over Carolina, over the Rangers, over Florida. I mean, they might not even be 5th best, depending on how their offseason works out. I think that's a little shenanigan-y to me, if you get my drift.
A little bonkers.
Yeah. But let's wrap it up, Nick. Great job this week, as always. Fans, thank you so much for joining us here. Again, 1 week until the NHL draft. Stick with us. All sorts of coverage coming. Things are going to get really busy. Till then, have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Union Junction.